Burundi. That's not a name many people might have heard of. In fact, not many people know a lot of countries in Africa, and it would not be surprising to say that you also might not have heard of a country called Burundi. Even for those of you who might have heard of it, it is because of one thing only, and that is because many now arguably call it the poorest country in Africa. The why. You see, the GDP of Burundi is $3.2 billion. You may think that sounds a lot, but when you compare that even with a country like Malawi whose GDP is $11 billion, you will understand what I mean. Of course, when you even compare that with the three biggest economies in Africa, like Nigeria, Egypt, and South Africa with GDP of $423, $361, and $301 billion respectively, you will begin to get the full picture. So in this video, we will discuss why Burundi is so poor right now. Landlocked and situated in Africa's Great Lakes region, Burundi is one of the continent's smallest nations. Green and fertile, it is nevertheless one of the three poorest countries in the world, with 75% of its population living below the poverty line, and this is expected to reach 87% soon. Burundi's GDP per capita is also the lowest in the world at just $271. To be fair, this country has 69% of its main export in coffee and 26% in tea, and it is obvious why subsistence farmers make up 90% of the population. As a landlocked country that also lacks resources and has almost non-existent industrialization except for the very few ones for processing coffee and tea, and no diversification in the economy, you will start to notice the problem with Burundi. Oh, and actually, although with maintenance problems, more than nearly 80% of the national roads are paved, despite many inaccuracies that is only 12%. However, some localities that are strategic economically are still difficult to reach. Many roads were spoiled during the war. What does this mean? I will tell you now. No country has ever prospered in violence or war, and just like its neighbor Rwanda, Burundi has had its share of troubles. In 1972, a failed Hutu-led uprising against the Tutsi-dominated leadership sparked a wave of massacres of Hutus that left between 100,000 and 300,000 dead. Again, in 1988, new massacres of Hutu left between 5,000 and 50,000 dead. The assassination in 1993 of the first Hutu president, Melchior Ndadaye, in a coup fomented by Tutsi soldiers, triggered a civil war between the Tutsi-dominated army and Hutu rebels. Thousands of Tutsi were massacred after the assassination. Since October 1993, the nation has suffered more massive ethnic-based violence, which has resulted in the death of perhaps 250,000 people and the displacement of about 800,000 others. The civil war lasted until 2006 despite several peace deals. Burundi has been in political crisis since 2015, when former Hutu rebel chief Nkurunziza, in power since 2005, announced he would run for a third term. The opposition saw it as a gross violation of the constitution and will jeopardize deals ending the civil war. All these tensions or wars are causing serious damage to the economy of Burundi. I will show you why in a minute. But before then, consider this. The population here is just above 11 million, and despite having almost the same population as its neighbor Rwanda, which has 12 million people living there, contrasting the economies of these closely linked countries shows a very big difference. Both countries got their independence from Belgium in 1962, and ethnic conflict between the Hutu and Tutsi plagued the two countries since. But since 2000, Rwanda has had Paul Kagame in power, and from the surface, things have been looking good for Rwanda economically. Although poverty still abounds in Rwanda, it is nowhere comparable to Burundi, and its economy is going downwards or at best static. This country is heavily dependent on bilateral and multilateral aid. In 2020, the national debt of Burundi amounted to around $1.92 billion. Although not particularly very trustworthy themselves, a series of largely unsuccessful 5-year plans initiated on July 1986 by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund attempted to reform the foreign exchange system, liberalize imports, reduce restrictions on international transactions, diversify exports, and reform the coffee industry. Experts believe that the World Bank and IMF reform programs for so-called poor countries of the world have always resulted in the countries becoming even worse off than before. This was the same for Burundi. The economy started getting worse, and when the much-promised better days and reformation by the country's leadership, mainly dominated by the Tutsi tribe, did not happen, it fueled more ethnic tensions. IMF structural adjustment programs in Burundi were suspended following the outbreak of the crisis in 1993. Before we continue, let me remind you to kindly subscribe to the channel, and if you are enjoying this video so far, why not let us know by giving it a like? With that done, let us continue. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that 1.7 million of Burundi's 11 million people are experiencing chronic severe food insecurity, and you can see why. The reason here is because the Burundian population growth rate is 2.5% per year, more than double the average global pace, and a Burundian woman has on average 6.3 children, nearly triple the international fertility rate. With a population that vastly relies on subsistence farming, the weight of a booming population, and the long-standing absence of coherent policies governing land ownership, many people barely have enough land to sustain themselves to even farm in the first place, let alone bring food on the table. As a country without many resources, experts will say that is not a reason to be poor, because there are many countries in the world without natural resources and are rich and prosperous countries. The solution is foreign investment in areas that will not jeopardize the local people, isn't it? Well, like I said before, the problem is that this country is totally not the place to invest your money because of all the political instability. We haven't even mentioned corruption, the #1 reason why many countries become poor. Unlike its neighbor Rwanda, which has many foreign companies investing in the country, Burundi's economy is not a place that welcomes foreign investment. Hence, diversification of the economy that will create more jobs for the people has not been possible, not even tourism. In 2019, 1.6 million tourists visited Rwanda and Burundi, just mere 200,000 in 2019 figures. There are many compounding reasons why countries become poor, but to become very poor like Burundi, looking at it as a whole like this is the only way to see why. I hope you have learned a thing or two and also enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think. What other reason do you think was missed out in this video? Let me know in the comment, and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.